Josh Pate is Late Kick Josh. You see him on 24/7. That's where he is on Twitter. He is with us now on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. What's up, Josh Pate? How are you?
Are you guys ready to wait through a basketball game tonight for your college football rankings after 9 p.m.?
It is my least favorite rankings of the year. The ranking show wears on me anyway because everybody got to have a hot take, and everybody likes to yell it over one another. And most of the like 99% of the stuff they get pissed about is always going to work itself out, but you have to be pissed about it because you got to fill an hour or whatever. This is my least favorite one of all those.
Little known fact, Josh.
Do you think
little known
go
fact?
Ahead, Dunaway. It's your show.
No, little known fact. There is now a tobacco road between Tuscaloosa and Auburn. We're a basketball state this year, man.
Yeah. So I heard. Do you think that the talent there at ESPN, far be it for them to admit it, but I think that they tour on these Tuesdays and they pull out their key card?
We lost Josh totally there.
Wow.
And the connection.
I do want to say about tonight's selection show, there is no drama. There's no intrigue. I think everybody knows exactly what 1 through 6 is going to be.
But I wondered where Josh was going because he started talking about ESPN key cards, and that sounded like that was going to be fun. So, Josh, let's pretend like you never dropped and start that thought over.
Yeah, I'm not going to say another word. That's how powerful that network is. Wow. So I'm just going to say I'm looking forward to a fun-filled evening of rankings on ESPN. God bless everyone who works there.
And long live Elon Musk.
I'm just saying it wouldn't be the most exciting day for me to show up to work. I work in an avenue, and I work for a company that fortunately, when I say I don't care, they just say, okay, don't talk about it. They don't have that option at ESPN. So
they don't.
To each their own, I guess.
Do you have a feeling, because I don't, that TCU wins out?
I didn't, but I keep saying that, and yet we keep on ticking games that I thought they would lose off the schedule. If I had to lean one way statistically, I would still say no. But the thing about what they did last week is not just that they won. They kind of took out the Swiss Army knife and they peeled out the screwdriver or the wood corkscrew, and all of a sudden they can win defensively, which I didn't think was possible for them. Maybe Texas contributed to that greatly. I still don't think they do. To me, what my bigger question is, instead of the whole TCU versus and the hypotheticals, is as unlikely as it is, what do you think they do if they're forced to choose between SEC champ LSU and one-loss Tennessee? If those were the A and B, how would they go on that? I still have no feel for that.
I think you got to go Tennessee because Tennessee whipped their ass.
But they tell you, and I want to emphasize they, not me, they tell you if you got a conference championship, that elevates you possibly above and beyond. And the only time that we as the committee account for head-to-head is when we view you as like totally equal. So would they view them as equal? Because if that's the case, you're right. Slam dunk. Tennessee goes. They got the head-to-head. I just don't know. And I know good and well I'm not going to get a straight answer from them tonight, so I guess we're just left speculating.
No, but in that scenario, Lance, and I agree with you, LSU beat Tennessee head-to-head, but that if I'm LSU, I'm like, yeah, but I beat Georgia head-to-head, and they're in. See what I'm saying? I mean, at that point, I think head-to-head, it's been a round robin. LSU's beaten Georgia, Georgia's beaten Tennessee, Tennessee's beaten LSU, so I don't think anything between the two teams on the field matters at that point. Now you just got to determine, as you said, Josh, all right, one of them's a conference champion, so we value that. We think Georgia's the better team, so they're in. Tennessee, enjoy the Sugar Bowl.
And, hey, FSU's rolling right now. That looked like it was going to be an albatross around LSU's neck, and all of a sudden FSU's quietly like one of the 15 highest performing teams in the country in the second half of the season. So I don't know if that's going to matter, but let's not forget that.
Because we didn't want to violate any of your copyrights, we did not play your take on Lane Kiffin's post-game comments and some of the things he said about the loss to Alabama. You sort of read into the little boosterism play that Lane Kiffin was doing there, whether it was his boosters or some boosters who may hire him someday. Give us your take on that again so we can have it on our platform too.
Well, the next time we go after someone legally will be the first time we go after someone legally. So feel free to clip away from now on. But look, so you guys know this because you've covered way more coaching searches than I have, but you know how these hires are actually made. And you know who the folks are sometimes who make the hires. And while young, impressionable kids out there may think that these are folks who have just not made the cut at NASA. So their next choice after not being a rocket scientist is running an athletic department. That's not necessarily the case. And sometimes these people are swayed or impressed by the most irrelevant, meaningless of things. And what Lane Kiffin's done is he's put together a body of work. He is who he is as a coach. But what he does, I think, publicly creates this image of him. And sometimes the image is happy-go-lucky, fun-loving, goofy, active on Twitter. Now, the reality is you can be that and also be a good coach, and you are what you are. But I think when he got in his postgame the other day, maybe it was already planned out, maybe it wasn't, but I think he knew I need to show a little edge about myself. And so he did his best Nick Saban impersonation. And they asked him some innocuous question about how Quinshon Judkins had a good day on the ground. And he took it like Nick Saban often does. And he already had an answer, and he just needed the question to reverse engineer the answer into. And so the first important thing he did was he cussed. You've got to do that to impress people. Okay. So he did that. And so I can already hear a lot of grown men giggling. Oh, listen to him. And then he started talking about how we don't care about that stuff. We care about winning. We came here to win. We didn't come here to cover spreads. We didn't come here to almost. We came here to win. That's the kind of stuff that gets those booster group texts fired up. That's the kind of thing that gets that high-level booster to text the AD or the chancellor or the president and say, this is what we need. In reality, it's just a guy talking into a microphone. But if you're that close, if you're in the conversation and you need some intangible thing to push you over the finish line, that's the kind of thing you do.
Josh Pate is with us at Late Kick Josh on Twitter. You can see him on 24/7 Sports as well. Every single week, he is headed to the Pacific Northwest, or I guess the West Coast.
Yeah.
I want to call it the Pacific Northwest.
We'll pull out the big map later.
West Coast.
LA,
Sorry. I was about to say the Pacific 12, and then I was like, well, that sounds stupid. They don't call it that anymore.
Thank you, Keith Jackson.
So that I said Pacific Northwest, we said it even dumber. Should go Pacific 12. He's headed to the Pac-12 this week. He is on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Is it easier to name SEC Coach of the Year or National Coach of the Year?
Could one of them be the other?
Yes.
I mean, I know Sonny Dykes is right here in the middle of this thing, and then it looked like Josh Heupel could still be Josh Heupel. Brian Kelly's right there in the mix. Listen, I just named one national coach and two SEC coaches, so I guess my answer is national coach.
I think it is, and that's why I asked that, because I do think it would be Sonny Dykes. I mean, I think it's nobody pays enough attention. Jim Mora Jr. has to get some consideration. That is just a horrific program that he's winning games at. But I don't know who I'd even go in the SEC. I mean, what Heupel's done has been terrific, but this is year one for Brian Kelly, and he slayed the dragon, and he's going to Atlanta. I don't know how you look past him.
I just think back so much to that opening night. And I hearken back to when Chip Kelly started at Oregon and their opening night in his tenure at Boise. They lose a close game. LeGarrette Blount just cold cocks a Boise player. And I remember it's so vivid in my mind, that image of him trying to get his team into the locker room after the game. And he's a new head coach here on the big stage. And I remember thinking, oh, man, like, how is this ever going to work out? And it works out fine. And likewise, Brian Kelly, night one at LSU. He's far more seasoned. But the way that game ended against Florida State, it just felt like such a disaster. I tweeted about an hour ago, 2 quotes from an LSU buddy of mine. The same person said both things. One of them is, Brian Kelly era is not going to last long here. And then a couple months later, Brian Kelly's dunking on all y'all. Like he didn't even remember saying the first thing. And so I'm not going to call him out by name yet, but it certainly is very, very valuable blackmail material for me. But I think that it's one thing if you just start hot and you don't ever undergo any kind of adversity. They started with adversity out of the gate and then rebounded quite nicely. And they had a blowout against Tennessee, as we were just talking about, mixed in there. So I can make an argument. If you wanted me to go politician mode, I can make a solid argument for all three of them.
Yeah, and I think nationally, I mean, much like TCU, I don't think that they're going to close the deal. But if USC or North Carolina runs the table, Lincoln Riley and Mac Brown would have to be in the conversation.
Let me see if you guys agree with this. So, A, I agree with what you just said. B, I don't think anyone's watching North Carolina football. I'm convinced no one is watching their games. And everyone starts to try and sound smart. So on Sundays and Mondays, they go to their nearest microphone and they say, ooh, Drake May needs to get more Heisman love. Well, give him love. Like, you're on air. Talk about him. And the point is, most folks aren't ready to talk about him because I don't think they're watching North Carolina football games. And I said that the other night, and I got some of the dirtiest DMs from fans of North Carolina. And I'm like, I'm trying to defend your guy here. I don't think people are watching. And then the other thing is, since they don't watch, they just go pull up scores. And all they see is North Carolina right now is like Auburn 2010. They're winning every one possession game. They are 6-0 in one possession games. And so either they're not watching them, or they look at the scores, or they may be watching them and say, well, they're just barely getting by. I can do better than Mac Brown. Like, okay, whatever. I think he's had a really good year.
You spent some time in New Orleans with the UCF and Tulane game this past week on your tour. Gus Malzahn looks like he's having fun. Is that real? Is he having a blast?
He smiled.
He smiled?
Yeah, he smiled a whole lot. It's not something that necessarily we saw a lot while he was at Auburn. I think that's a book. I think that is a Netflix series whenever someone's ready to make it. And you just start in 2017. I was talking to Christy Malzahn on the field down in New Orleans, and I said, you know what I remember? I remember when you guys lost to LSU in 2017. In the post-game press room, before Gus walks in, she's in there leaned up against the wall, and the entire Auburn media contingent is in there and well within earshot of her. They're just openly speculating about who the next Auburn head coach is going to be. And she didn't say a word, and I told her, it's crazy when you think in retrospect how that turned out, because it was only a few weeks later. You beat number 1 Georgia, you beat number 1 Bama, you push Auburn up against the wall, you leverage Arkansas against them, you get a new contract with a massive buyout. Then you're bought out a couple of years later. Now you're in a perfect position, and they tell you 5 minutes after you walk in the door at UCF, oh, by the way, we're going to the Power 5. So you're still going to be a Power 5 coach. You're living the buyout life while also living the Power 5 life. Who gets to do that? Oh, and by the way, you're also going to get to live in Florida 12 months out of the year. So there's that. If nothing else works for you, there's that.
Rockstar, would you put a Netflix show about Gus Malzahn on the viewing menu?
Well, I'd put anything on there if it's as long as chip's not there. Potato chip. Screw everything over for me.
Josh Pate, watch him. Late Kick Josh. He's taking a train over the Rockies out to the magical West Coast. The victory bell. He'll be ringing the victory bell for somebody this weekend. Josh, thank you for the time. Enjoy it.
Appreciate it, guys.
All right, buddy. Take care. Josh Pate with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline at Late Kick Josh on Twitter.